Hello students of 8132 Curriculum Instruction, our graduate students. My name is Professor Mary Hermes. I'm on leave this year, so I haven't met maybe a lot of you, but I've met some of you. If you've been around a few years, I've been in the department for 6 years. Today, for my part, for this large overview methods class, I'm going to talk a little bit about critical queer feminist methodologies, what have actually impacted my work quite a bit throughout my career. And they're in everything I do, whether I call it language revitalization or something so benign as teachers in schools. I'm always informed by this particular, what we're going to call a methodology for today. So I'm going to start by doing sort of a long introduction that tells you about a little bit about my research projects and how these ideas have been really fundamental in shaping those projects. And then the second thing I'm going to do is to give an example where we make up a research question. I invite you to do the same thing. I'm going to take one and be very general and think about applying some of these concepts and what that might start to look like and how it might start to move things around. And then the last thing I'll do is what Mark Vagley and Bodung Chen have asked me to do, is to talk about 3 of the readings, well, specifically King and Cronin, which was a reading for everyone as I understand it. But then secondly, the Dillard, St. Pierre, and Ahmad, which one of those you read. So I'll shape some research questions, or some discussion questions rather, towards the end of this talk. Okay. So the article we're not talking about actually specifically has to do with my academic career. That was written in she references Elizabeth Ellsworth in 1989, and I came into the picture in Madison in 1991, where I worked very specifically with Elizabeth Ellsworth. In fact, Liz Ellsworth was the reason I stayed in graduate school. So I met her as she was at Curriculum and Instruction at Madison and worked with her there in a cohort of students, graduate students, and we were much like a brat pack because we were there for reasons of reifying our identity and working in our own communities, and we'd all felt othered by academia. So that drew us together, and Liz's work in race representation identity, and specifically to say, why doesn't this feel empowering, which was a good question. And I'm sorry to say, I think it's still a relevant question at this time. We use that word, empowering critical pedagogies, without scratching very much beneath the surface. So I'm hoping that these readings, your discussion, and things I or your other professors might say to you today will encourage you to think about including some of these ideas, whether it's your specific forefronted methodology or not. It can help shape your research. So in graduate school, we read the third wave of feminism, which for those of you who don't know, just briefly, those are when the feminists of color came into feminism and said, you know, this is a very white movement, and you've said it's a movement for all of us women, and yet it's not. So these were our Bibles. This bridge called my back. Borderlands, Glorylands Oldua, and others that sort of really exploded the feminist thought that had come from the movement of the 70s and was now established women's studies in academia by the 90s. We said, where are the voices of the so-called others in this? And aren't we still women? So that combined with these ideas of post-structuralism, particularly influential in shaping our research projects. And why was post-structuralism so influential? Because critical pedagogy and the neo-Marxism were at the time sort of the mainstay, the thing to push back against. So that's a little bit of the chronology of it. So if you were doing social justice work in education, you might study with Michael Apple, for example, who was also there at the time, who very much did sort of a structural analysis of class and then include sort of all oppressions And post-structuralism came in and said, well, these don't feel empowering because people don't have any agency in those models. And so where's the agency of the individual, and why do we still come up with a grand meta-narrative, and a solution which can only be about workers unite and revolt? There's got to be something else for us in education. And similarly, if there's still a hierarchy where I, the teacher, on top of the hierarchy, do not examine any of the power and how it's circulating in complex ways within individuals, then I am being the white lady bountiful, and empowering you and putting that empowerment on top of you, colonizing you with my empowerment. Okay, so those were a lot of the ideas. I was only in graduate school not to become an academic, but because of who I was and my identity as a mixed heritage, indigenous, queer person, and wanting really to figure out if academia could be leveraged to do something about that kind of an interest. What can we do about this? How can I learn skills to organize? How could I understand it better? And so that was my quest, and my project led me to the Lakudere Reservation.